comments tonight. My name is Jordan Henry. I'm a concerned parent in Glendale. Yesterday, I received an email from Learning for Justice with the subject titled Resources for Transgender Awareness Week. All the teachers in Glendale who are also registered on the Learning for Justice site would have received this same email. In the email, Learning for Justice specifically recommended the document Best Practices for Serving LGBTQ Students. The context in which this email was sent is salient to us in Glendale because the GUSD board recently distanced itself from the contents of this document, which contain pornography, encourages children to masturbate, poses intrusive questions to minors about their turn-ons, their turn-offs. If any member of the public would like to see the actual content of these books, please email me directly at jddhenry@gmail.com. And again, all teachers in Glendale who are registered on the LFJ site received this same email recommending these materials. One of the Learning for Justice's primary goals is to, and I quote, dismantle white supremacy. I am certainly in favor of dismantling the belief that the white race is inherently superior to other races in either biologically or socially determined ways. In other words, the ideology of white supremacy should certainly be dismantled. However, earlier this year, in the same publications resource where pornography is also recommended by Learning for Justice, Learning for Justice published an article called "It Was Always About Control: How Schools Maintain White Supremacy." The article states, quote, "White supremacy and racism are so deeply embedded in our education system that they will not be eradicated until everyone who wants to see change is ready to accept responsibility for enacting it." Each member of the board and Dr. Ekshian held their current positions prior to the adoption of Learning for Justice. If the Glendale Board of Education and Dr. Ekshian are committing themselves to dismantling white supremacy, then according to Learning for Justice, they are also accepting responsibility for having enacted the white supremacy that must now be dismantled. I'd like to pose a question to the parents and community members of Glendale. Should we, the taxpayers of Glendale, continue to support an organization like Learning for Justice, which explicitly holds the board members themselves for being responsible for white supremacy? I would argue no, we should certainly not support Learning for Justice for this very reason. Also, according to that same article, quote, "One definition of white supremacy, including in schools, is a political and economic cultural system in which whites overwhelmingly control power and material resources." Today, looking at the board, I see very little racial or cultural diversity, which according to Learning for Justice results in an overwhelming control of power and material resources. So while I personally hold very little esteem for Learning for Justice's views on diversity, I would think the board would at least be consistent with its own stated goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion. If the board truly endorses Learning for Justice, then would it not be consistent if some portion of the board would consider ending their terms early or not running for office again to ensure immediate dismantling of white supremacy? To me, this is the only logical means of dismantling white supremacy in Glendale Unified, according to Learning for Justice. Thank you for listening to my concerns. Dr. Ekshian offered an answer, which is against board policy, to the last caller's question, which was a totally valid question. I'm absolutely in support of the question being asked about the track being open. However, I would appreciate an answer to my question since the previous caller got one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. The next speaker